Warning: this story contains graphic depictions of violence, murder, and psychological horror. It is not suitable for children or sensitive audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. I've always enjoyed living alone. Even as a kid, I was independent and liked having my own space. So when I finally got my own apartment after college, I was thrilled. No roommates, no one else's mess to deal with. Just me and my cozy one-bedroom. The apartment itself wasn't anything fancy. It was in an old building in a small town, one of those places where everyone knew each other. My unit was on the third floor, at the end of a long hallway. But with some posters, plants, and a comfy couch, I made it feel like home. After a few months of living there, I fell into a comfortable routine. During the week, I'd work, hit the gym, cook dinner, and relax in the evenings. On weekends, I'd sleep in, run errands, and sometimes meet up with friends. The alone time was so peaceful. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. It was a Friday night in October when everything changed. I had just gotten home from happy hour with coworkers. Kicking off my heels and pouring a glass of wine, I was looking forward to a quiet night in. I switched on the TV for background noise and heated up leftovers for dinner. After eating, I decided to take a long, hot shower. The whole apartment was steamy as I stepped out of the bathroom in my robe. Rubbing a towel over my wet hair, I walked toward the kitchen to top off my wine. That's when I heard the first thump. It seemed to come from the living room. I froze, listening closely. Silence. I shook my head, laughing at myself. Just the noises of an old building, I figured. I had just grabbed the wine bottle when a second, louder thump made me nearly drop it. This time, it was clearly coming from inside my apartment. My heart began to race. For a moment, I stood paralyzed in the kitchen, straining to hear any other sounds. Had I imagined it? Or was there someone or something inside my apartment? Slowly, I tiptoed across the room and grabbed a steak knife from the block on the counter. With the knife gripped tightly in my right hand, I crept toward the living room. My pulse was roaring in my ears. Fear constricted my throat so I could barely breathe. Right as I reached the living room doorway, an ear-splitting crash came from the direction of my bedroom. I shrieked in terror before slapping my hand over my mouth. Someone was definitely in my apartment, and they knew I was home. I stumbled backward, desperately looking for somewhere to hide. My apartment had an open floor plan with hardly any doors besides the bathroom. I squeezed into a corner of the kitchen, clamping my hand over my mouth to stifle panicked whimpers. Over the sound of my thudding heart, I detected the faint creak of a floorboard. Someone was walking slowly through the living room toward the kitchen. Fresh terror surged through me. I cowered back against the corner cabinets, wildly pointing the knife toward the doorway. A figure appeared silhouetted in shadows. I saw the outline of a large man, at least 6 feet tall. Before I could even process what I was seeing, he rushed at me with a guttural shout. On instinct, I lurched forward and plunged the knife into his abdomen. I felt it slice through flesh and hit bone. The man let out an inhuman howl and staggered back. Shaking violently, I stumbled away from him. My only thought was getting out. Still clutching the knife, I bolted for the front door. Just as I got there, the man recovered and lunged toward me. This time I felt the knife meet resistance as I slashed it across his chest. Hot blood splattered me as he fell to his knees with an agonized wail. I fumbled the lock open and tore into the hallway. Screaming for help, I pounded on neighbors' doors. The floors were empty. Everyone was out for the evening. Still screaming, I ran for the stairs to escape. Just as I reached the top, a blood-soaked hand grabbed my robe. The man had followed me. With inhuman force, he hurled me down the stairs. I felt bones crack as my head smashed into the wall. As darkness engulfed me, I heard him coming down the steps towards my limp body. I'm not sure how much time passed before I regained consciousness. There was a deafening silence. I couldn't move. I could feel blood, thick and warm, pooling beneath me. The excruciating pain confirmed I was still alive. Barely. Terrified the man was still lurking nearby, I forced all my energy into holding still and keeping silent. After what seemed like hours, the silence remained. Eventually, I slipped back into blackness. I woke again to flashing lights penetrating the haze. As voices surrounded me, I felt my body being lifted. When I was set down again, the movement stopped. My eyelids fluttered briefly to glimpse the inside of an ambulance before I faded again. Over the next days, maybe weeks, reality came in fragments. The beeping of monitors, morphine dulling the pain, concerned faces hovering over me, whispers about head trauma, blood loss, and multiple fractures. It was too much to grasp, so I continued to float in and out of lucidity. When I finally fully woke, I found myself lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to tubes and wires. My left arm and leg were in casts. The entire left side of my face felt hot, swollen, and tender. But I was alive. As my mind slowly cleared, I began remembering that night. The thumps, the knife, the attack, the body crumpling as I stabbed it. The hands hurled me down the stairs. I broke into a cold sweat, heart monitor racing. Was he here? Had he followed me? Just then, the door opened, and my Aunt Lily entered with a police officer. Their grave faces sent a chill through me. Aunt Lily rushed to hug me, sobbing, before the officer began gently questioning me about the attack. In a halting voice, I described every detail I could remember. His height and build, what he wore, the feeling of plunging the knife into his body, how he'd thrown me down the stairs when I tried to escape, how sure I was that he had come after me. The officer listened intently, taking notes. When I finished, he paused before speaking in a soft tone. There was no evidence anyone else had been in the apartment, no signs of forced entry, no blood or DNA besides my own, no reports of an injured or dead intruder anywhere in the vicinity. I stared at him in disbelief. I knew what I had experienced. I described where I had stabbed the man, begged him to look closer. There had to be some evidence. Finally, he delivered the news that made my blood turn to ice. They had footage from my building's security camera that night. It showed me arriving home, then leaving the apartment an hour later, alone, before tumbling down the stairs at the top. According to the footage, no one else had been there. So there you have it, the story of that traumatic night that still gives me chills. The night I know, beyond any doubt, that there was someone else inside my apartment with me. Even if the evidence says otherwise. I don't care what anyone else believes. I know my mind didn't fabricate the break-in, the struggle, the violence, the feeling of driving a knife into another human being, of him hurling me down the stairs. My injuries healed eventually, but the memories never faded. They still jolt me awake at night in a cold sweat. During the day, every unexpected sound makes dread grip my heart. I constantly feel unseen eyes on me. But the worst part is the doubt. Doubts raised by the lack of evidence. Doubts planted by the concerned looks everyone gives me now. Doubts whispered by that nagging voice in my head. What if it was all in your mind? What if you imagined everything? What if no one was ever there with you?